As you know, the ambassadors for the UN Security Council are here today visiting, and Ambassador Haley wanted to come by and make sure we have an update as to what they're talking about, some of the issues. When she's done, she's got to join a meeting that's in progress. Secretary Mnuchin has some comments that he'd like to make. We'll take some questions from him and then resume the briefing. So without further ado, the Ambassador of the United Nations, Nikki Haley.
Thank you, Sean. I will tell you, we have had an exciting day in D.C. We are hosting the members of the Security Council, and when you think of that, this is the most powerful group that decides sanctions, relief, any sort of conflict that comes up. This is the group. And so the idea that they were able to come to D.C. is overwhelming for them. They are extremely pleased. We started the morning at the Blair House with Senators Graham and Cardin, as well as Congressman Smith and Congresswoman Bass. So they had a lot of interaction, probably about an hour and a half, talking about issues from budget all the way to peacekeeping issues, as well as conflicts in North Korea and Syria, and then with the problems in Iran. So it was a very healthy discussion there. From there, we came over to the White House, and the president greeted all of the members, had his picture taken with them, and then we all sat down for lunch. And it was an open dialogue, very much of the members wanting to hear from the president what his plans are, what he was going to continue to do on Syria or not continue to do, North Korea. All of those issues are certainly at the forefront. And the idea that he would have that dialogue with them is tremendously helpful to me. Whereas, in the Security Council, we need them to really engage. We need them to now know that we are about action. And I think that what we've tried to do in the UN is really bring reform in the way we spend, reform in the peacekeeping operations, but also reform in the resolutions that are passed, that what we pass actually means something, and that there's accountability in what we pass. And so I think they heard that loud and clear today from the president. I think that they are thrilled with the engagement that they had, and I think it shows that the president's very engaged on foreign policy, and they see that. The idea that he would sit down and want to talk to them about each of their countries and the Security Council collectively is massive for a president to be able to do this, and it was certainly helpful for the United States. Now they are in briefings with General McMaster, focusing on North Korea, also focusing on ISIS, and engaging on that front, and we'll continue to have other conversations as well. But as far as we go, great day for the Security Council, great day with the president, and certainly more good to come out of this meeting. So thank you very much. I've got some ambassadors waiting, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. So without further ado, Secretary of the Treasury, Steven Mnuchin.
Seems like I'm becoming a regular here. It's nice to see all of you again. Earlier today, the United States Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Asset Control imposed sanctions in response to the April 4th, 2017 sarin attack on innocent civilians by the regime of Syrian dictator Assad. OFAC is sanctioning 271 employees of Syria's Scientific Studies and Research Center, the Syrian government agency responsible for developing and producing non-conventional weapons and means to deliver them. OFAC has targeted these 271 employees because they have expertise in chemistry and related fields or have worked in support of chemical weapons programs since at least 2012. Today's action, less than 3 weeks after the attack on Khan Sheikhoun, is one of the largest ever executed by OFAC. In a single action, we are more than doubling the number of individuals and entities sanctioned since the start of the Syrian conflict pursuant to Syria-related executive orders. These sweeping sanctions are intended to hold the Assad regime and those who support it, directly or indirectly, accountable for their blatant violations of the Chemical Weapons Convention in UN Security Council Resolution 21-118. The United States is sending a strong message with this action that we will not tolerate the use of chemical weapons by any actor, and we intend to hold the Assad regime accountable for its unacceptable behavior. The Treasury Department, together with the Department of State and our international partners, will continue to relentlessly pursue and shut down the financial networks of any individuals involved with serious production or use of chemical weapons. I'd also comment that recently we had sanctions on North Korea and Iran, and we'll also continue to add to and monitor those as appropriate. And with that, I'd be happy to take a few questions.
Is this the only round of sanctions we can expect against Syria in the wake of that chemical weapons attack, or are you considering more? And are you considering the possibility of sanctions against Russia for not going far enough to try to dissuade Assad?
We don't comment on the specifics of sanctions that we are going to do in the future. But again, what I will tell you is these sanction programs are very important, they're very effective, and we will continue to use them to the maximum amount available by law.
Secretary, on the budget, is the border wall a deal breaker for the president, even to the point of a government shutdown?
I'm not going to comment on the specifics of that, but what I will say is I was in a meeting this morning with Director Mick Mulvaney and other senior people. The president is working hard to keep the government open and addressing various issues.
Can you tell us what these sanctions actually do? What is different today than was different yesterday before OFAC moved?
Well, the sanctions are enormously important. So by identifying 271 additional people, these sanctions, as you know, will both freeze assets if there's assets here and prevent U.S. entities from doing business, as well as these sanctions have enormous impact with all of our partners around the world who also work with us on these issues.
We're not doing any business. Are we, sir? We're not doing any business with these
As you
people.
know, the administration is trying to grapple with the Paris Climate Agreement and come to a decision on that. Where do you stand on it? Do you support staying in Paris or coming out?
Again, I would just comment that we're having discussions on that, and that's where I'll go on that.
Are you aware of any American companies doing business with those individuals that have sanctioned today?
Said last week there'd be a tax reform proposal released Wednesday.
He did indeed.
So,
Been widely reported.
yeah. I imagine that surprised you a little bit. Or what can we expect?
Let me just first say, I've been working with the president for over the last year on his economic plan in regards to creating growth. The president is very determined that we can get to sustained economic growth of 3% or higher. We're working on tax reform, we're working on regulatory reform, we're looking on job creation, and this is something that on the tax side I've been meeting weekly with the House and the Senate on designing things, and we'll be coming out, as the president said, with more details on Wednesday.
Secretary, thank you very much. Along the lines of tax reform, I know the specifics of the broad details will be delivered on Wednesday, but without getting into the specifics, what does the middle class gain if there is a simplification but also a loss of deductions, whatever they might be? If we lose the deductions, how does that help the middle class?
Well, let me just say, we've been clear on what the president's objectives are for tax reform. Middle income tax cut, a priority of the president's. Simplification. The average American should be able to do their taxes on a large postcard. Business tax reform. We need to make business taxes competitive, and we expect with doing that, we will bring back trillions of dollars from offshore.
Secretary?
Thank you, sir. I guess the question I have is to sort of bounce off of what John was asking about this announcement on Wednesday. It doesn't sound like we're going to get the finer details of what this tax reform package will entail. Is it a good idea to start talking about tax reform, something that you said can't be accomplished by August, when you don't have all the details?
Well, there'll be details that'll come out, and yes, I think it is important that we're talking about it, and we are going to move forward. I'll just take a couple more right there. Yes?
Can I just follow up on what Major was asking you? For those of us who are not completely clear about the 271 employees, are you suggesting by looking at these sanctions that there are U.S. companies, or they have holdings in the U.S., or they would be traveling or doing some sort of business that we're actually freezing or barring?
Again, I can't comment on the specifics of these sanctions beyond what we release, but I can assure you that when the U.S. puts out sanctions, they have impacts both here and throughout the world, and we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think it is impactful. It's quite impactful. One more back there, yes.
Mr. Secretary, would you say that simplification of the tax code or cuts would be the first priority? You've mentioned both the postcard and closing the gap with growth, but which is first thing that we're going to hear about on Wednesday?
Again, what I'd say, on the personal side, we're about a middle income tax cut and simplification. On the business side, we're about making them competitive. And this is the last one. Go ahead. Again, what I've said before is the tax plan will pay for itself with economic growth. Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary and Ambassador Haley. I just want to kind of walk through what the rest of the day and the week, and then we'll get to some questions. As you know, this morning the President had a call with German Chancellor Merkel, who had extended a gracious invitation for the first daughter and assistant to the President, Ivanka Trump, to attend the W20 summit. Tomorrow, Ivanka will be in Berlin at the W20 participating in a panel that is entitled Inspiring Women, Scaling Up Women's Entrepreneurship. This follows the roundtable on vocational education and workforce development, issues that are central both to Ivanka and the Chancellor's agenda that they hosted here at the White House in March. While in Germany, Ivanka will also visit a school for interactive tour and discussion with students participating in the Apprentice program. In commemoration of Holocaust Remembrance Day, she will visit the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe in Berlin. A readout of the President's and Chancellor Merkel's call should be out already. Following that call, the President spoke with Dr. Peggy Whitson, the commander of the International Space Station, via video teleconference. As I told you guys last week, Dr. Whitson, who is on her third extended stay aboard the International Space Station, breaks the record for the most space time of any American astronaut. The President was honored to celebrate this incredible achievement by Dr. Whitson and the American space program and discuss the exciting future of space exploration and space science, including how the Inspire Women Act, which the President recently signed, ensures that NASA continues recruiting women for important STEM-related jobs in aerospace. After that, as I mentioned at the top, the President had a working lunch with UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and the other ambassadors of the countries that are part of the UN Security Council. Under the President's leadership, America has once again taken a leadership role on the world stage, and our global partners have welcomed this renewal of American diplomacy. Later on this afternoon, the President will sign a proclamation on Holocaust Remembrance Day, part of the week-long Days of Remembrance, first held in 1979 and later established by Congress as our nation's commemoration of the Holocaust. Tomorrow, as every president since the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum opened in 1993, President Trump will participate in a Days of Remembrance commemoration. As he said during his video message to the delegates of the World Jewish Congress Plenary Assembly, the Trump administration is committed to stamping out prejudice and anti-Semitism everywhere it is found. Following the proclamation, the President will host a credential ceremony for newly appointed ambassadors. He will then have dinner with Senator and Mrs. McCain and Senator Lindsey Graham. Later this evening, the Vice President will return to Washington, where he's finished his time throughout the world. While in Hawaii today, the President will have lunch with U.S. troops at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam and participate in an arrival ceremony and U.S. PACOM before boarding Air Force Two for the ride home to Washington. As we get closer to the President's 100th day in office, throughout the week, the White House is hosting briefings and events to provide several opportunities for many folks in the press to hear directly from the administration and our officials on what we've achieved in the first 100 days and what we're looking to continue to achieve on days 101, 102, 200, etc. Throughout the week, the President, cabinet officials, and senior White House staff will be talking about the President's agenda on national, local media, and various platforms. Finally, I wanted to acknowledge the distressing reports regarding American citizens coming out of the Ukraine and North Korea. We're deeply saddened by the death of a paramedic and United States citizen serving in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe Special Monitoring Mission. We extend our deepest condolences to his family, friends, and loved ones, and wish his colleagues who are injured in the blast a quick and speedy recovery. We call on all parties to cooperate with the Special Monitoring Mission to allow it to fully investigate this incident. The tragic death of a staff member only serves to underline the urgent need for all sides, particularly the Russian-led separatist forces, to implement their commitments under the Minsk agreements. We are also aware of reports that a United States citizen was detained in North Korea over the weekend. The protection of United States citizens is one of our government's highest priorities. I would direct any further inquiries on this matter to the State Department. Also on North Korea, on Wednesday, the White House campus will play host to a briefing for all 100 U.S. senators on the subject. The briefers will be Secretary Tillerson and Mattis, Director Coates, and General Dunford. This is a Senate briefing convened by the Majority Leader, not a White House briefing. We are just serving as the location. For further questions, I would direct you to the Majority Leader's office and the office of the 4 briefers. With that, glad to take a few questions.
Talking about the budget, how committed is, if this was asked earlier, but can you talk about how committed the president is to having the border wall funded this week, or having some funding in that spending bill? And if it is not in there, will he sign it?
Well, again, those negotiations continue with House and Senate leadership. Obviously, the money for our military and our border security and wall have been part of that request, and that is something that those are the president's priorities heading in, with respect to the CR and keeping the government open. I think we feel very confident where we're headed, and I'm not going to get ahead of the negotiations that are ongoing. Director Mulvaney has been very, very deep in those discussions, and I expect there to be an announcement soon but I'm not going to start to take things on and off the table with respect to what the president may or may not do. Phil?
Yeah, Sean, just doubling up on that question there about the CR debate and the funding. Does he specifically expect there to be funding for the border wall, or would border security measures be enough to satisfy the president? And how do you differentiate between the two? For example, what could be funded in the CR that you could say is part of the wall, even if it's not explicitly
right? So there's obviously a lot of components to that. You've got fencing and drones, and I don't want to get ahead of those negotiations. They are ongoing, but the president's priorities have been very clear from the beginning.
It sounds, Sean, just to follow up, are we backing off on the wall? Are we saying it is on the table?
No, we're saying that the president has made very clear that he's got 2 priorities in this continuing resolution. Number 1, the increase in funding for the military, and number 2, for our homeland and border security and the wall. But I'm not going to start to get into, we were having a negotiation with House and Senate leadership, and to prejudge where it ends up at this point would not be prudent. Trey?
Thanks, Sean. I have 2 questions for you. On the Syrian economic sanctions, how will the administration determine how effective they are?
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of ways, but I think first and foremost is to send a clear signal to make sure that they understand that we don't take their actions lightly. And that we want to do everything we can to have stability in the region. So I think there's going to be a lot of ways in terms of their behavior going forward that we'll know whether they're working. But I think, as the president has made clear, and Secretary Mnuchin just did, I think we have a lot of tools at our disposal to try to achieve an outcome that brings stability to that region.
And my second one on North Korea, the fact that a 3rd U.S. citizen has been detained by the regime in Pyongyang, does this make it more difficult for the president to negotiate through China to try to denuclearize North Korea?
No, I think China, and we noted it before, Ambassador Haley noted it in several interviews this morning, but China has been very, very helpful in this process and continues to be, and I think we hope to see a change in behavior, but it is a very positive sign, the level of engagement that China has enacted.
Is the Trump administration calling for the release of this U.S. citizen currently being detained?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we want to make sure that all of our citizens are protected and returned home, but the State Department is playing the lead on that. Eamon.
Thanks, Sean. As you know, there's quite a bit of concern among Republicans on Capitol Hill about the federal deficit. When you roll out the tax plan on Wednesday, are you also going to include pay-fors in there? That is, those things that raise revenue as well as those things that are tax cuts, so that conservatives can be confident that this won't blow a hole in the deficit?
Yeah, I think we will have further details. I'm not going to get ahead of the president's rollout, but I'm not going to the level of specificity in terms of the pay-fors and the cost. We'll have to see how comfortable the president is. Jennifer.
Sean, can you tell us if the president is aware of the American pastor jail in Turkey, and did he raise that with President Erdogan when he called Monday to congratulate him?
I'm not going to get into the specifics of the president's conversation. We're obviously aware of that action, and we're going to continue to work through the State Department on that. Jordan.
Thank you, Sean. Can you explain why President Trump didn't use the word genocide to refer to the killing of 1.5 million Armenians in his statement today?
Yeah, the statement that was put out is consistent with the statements that have been put out for at least several of the past administrations. So I think if you look back to the language that President Obama, President Bush, et cetera, have used, the language that the president used is consistent with all of that. Katie.
Topics. First, the border wall and the logistics of that. Secretary Kelly said he still expects construction to start this summer. There are still a few ranchers in Texas and Arizona who welcome the security but are skeptical of giving up family-owned land that's been in their families for generations. So what is the White House message to them directly, and what can you guarantee that they'll be compensated?
I think we will do everything in accordance with the law. This has been an issue that has gone on several times as that issue has been raised over the last several years. And so we will do everything in accordance with the law with respect to the land that's needed for that. But again, the Homeland Security Secretary understands what's going to be needed, and we'll do surveys and the appropriate planning to make sure that we minimize that to the extent possible.
Question, a different topic. The FBI and Justice Department last week arrested 2 doctors in Michigan for allegedly performing genital mutilation on little girls as young as 6 years old. It's the first case in the United States. What is the White House reaction to that case?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked before about pending investigations, and we don't comment on any pending investigations or actions by the Justice Department. Major.
Is 100 days, as the president said on Twitter, a ridiculous benchmark or an important one?
Well, I think obviously in the context of an entire administration, there is a lot that I think we feel very proud that we've done and taken care of. When you look at the immigration piece in particular, border crossings way down, the number of executive orders and pieces of legislation the president signed, I think we feel very proud of what we've been able to accomplish and fulfill the promises that he's made to the American people. But I think it's got to be kept in context. And I think there is sort of this artificial number that gets thrown out. So on one... Well, I mean, the context is it's 100 days, and you have 4 years in your first term, and 8 years for 2 terms. That I think
Mr. Trump introduced a contract with the American voter over 100 days.
I understand, right. And so again, I think when you look at the number of pieces of legislation, the executive orders, business confidence, the place the U.S.'s role in the world, there's a lot that we feel that a lot of accomplishments that have occurred, and we feel very good about what we've done as we head up to this first 100 days. But I think you're going to continue to see a lot of action and a lot of results going into the second 100 days, the third 100 days, all the way through.
If in 100 days there is no funding, explicit funding to the wall, and there's no health care reform or repeal of Obamacare, would the president consider that, and would he invite his supporters to consider that a conspicuous failure, based on the promises he made during the campaign?
Right. I think when you look at the totality of what we've accomplished on job creation, on immigration, on trade, it is unbelievable what he has been able to do. And so it's not, you can cherry pick any couple of things and say, okay, well, what about this or that? But I think when you look at it overall, in terms of the drop in border crossings, if you look at consumer confidence and the relationships that we've developed around the globe and the accomplishments this president's had on protecting the country, on bringing back jobs and starting, those have been unbelievably significant. And so to minimize that, or to look and pick out 2 or 3 things, but I think, look, we're going to continue to push for health care reform. We feel very good about the direction that it's going in. It's been very positive. And I think that the construction of a wall is going to continue to be an area that moves forward. But all of that stuff is happening just as the president asked for and committed to doing. Some of it, has been a little slower, but mostly because of working through Congress and getting things done. But when you think about what he's started, he'll move forward on tax reform, healthcare, on immigration, on trade. It's been a hugely successful first 100 days.
And without the president necessarily describing it as a failure or not, would he say that he's learned something about the process and how long things take that he perhaps didn't appreciate as a candidate? Maybe he overpromised on the speed with which he achieved these things?
No, look, with all due respect, I think that when you look at the lists of things in each of the various areas that he's been able to do, I think he's very pleased.
I'm talking about some conspicuous campaign promises that rally after rally he
Right.
made and said, don't worry, it's going to happen.
Right, and I think on
Please.
healthcare-
All I'm asking is, does he have a different awareness of how difficult those things are than he did as a candidate?
I'm sure that there are things that you learn in the job, but I think that he is very proud of what he has set out to do and the progress that we've made. And I think you're going to see healthcare get done, but it's going to get done right. And that, in particular, is something that we're continuing to work at. We can't make people vote, but we've made significant progress and moved the legislation forward and improved it greatly. And I think that we are going to see progress on that. Zeke.
Two questions on two different topics. First, follow up on Eamon's and the other questions on the budget. Is the president willing to sign a continuing resolution that is not deficit neutral or deficit reducing? For instance,
Sign a continuing resolution?
Yeah, yes. A continuing resolution that would increase the deficit.
I have not seen a score on anything that's come out, and I think we'll have to wait and see what the final.
One way.
I'm not at this point.
And following up on Jordan's question, the president talked a lot about, has not been shy about criticizing his predecessors for some of their missteps from both parties, and also hasn't, has made a point of often bucking convention. So why not take this moment to label the killing of 1.5 million Armenians a genocide?
I think, again, as I noted to Jordan, the statement that the president put out is consistent with the last several administrations. I understand that, but there is it is perfectly in keeping with the language that's been used over and over again. John. Yeah.
Sorry, I was right.
Well, you had your hand.
Would you agree with the assessment that some within the administration have that a vote on health care this week is very, very unlikely?
I think the vote is going to get scheduled when Speaker Ryan and Leader McCarthy and Congressman Scalise determine that they have the votes and they feel confident. I'm not. I think we've been very clear. The president made it clear on Friday when he was walking back over from the Treasury Department that if it happens and we have the votes this week, great. If it's next week or the week after, but I think we want to make sure that we've got the votes and we're headed in the right direction before putting some kind of artificial deadline.
But would you think that this week is unlikely?
I think that whenever the Speaker and the leadership over in the House tell us that they feel confident that they have the votes, then we would encourage them to move forward. I mean, I hate to, I'm not trying to not answer the question, but I think that's the answer. It comes down to when they feel as though they've got the commitments to push the bill forward.
Well, there was a push to try to get something on the legislative scoreboard by the 100th day. Does it look like that now will not happen?
As I said, we have been very clear from here, and I think the president has been very clear in his comments that that our goal is to get it done and get it done right and get it done to make sure that we have the votes. I think there have been I've read some background quotes and sources about when it wants to, but we've been very clear publicly about when we want to get that done. Kelly.
The president's been very clear that Judge Gorsuch, now Justice Gorsuch, is a big part of his first 100 days accomplishments. And the White House, in the rollout about the 100 days, said there would be a dinner with the president and all the justices of the Supreme Court. Now that is off the list. Is the dinner not happening, or is it not publicly being talked about because it's wrapped up in the politics of the 100
I think that
days?
we've moved some things around on the president's schedule this week, but we hope to have something at some point.
To sort of sweep up the high court into the politics of 100 days.
No, I think that having a relationship and a meeting with the Supreme Court at some point would be a great idea, and it's something that we hope to have on the schedule at some point soon. Caitlin.
Can you explain the president's change of thought on DACA?
I think he's been consistent about two things. One, that he's had a heart. He wants to make sure that he does what's in the interest of children in particular. But secondly, I think the president's priorities since he took office have been very clear that the focus would be on folks who presented a danger to public safety. And that's what it's been. And that's where it continues to be. And I think he is someone who understands the issue and the priorities that need to get laid out by this country. And so everything that he has done has been consistent with what he has said from the get-go. Jonathan.
I understand that he said that the criminals would leave first, but last August he said that DACA defied federal law and was illegal. So does he still think it's illegal?
I understand, and I think that his comments that he made last week, that he understands that in a lot of cases this involves families and small children who've been here, and he has a heart. We're going to work through the immigration. I understand. What I'm trying to do is answer the question that I think the president wants to make sure that he addresses the issue of illegal immigration and all of its components in terms of visa reform, border security, the wall, all of these things in a system of priorities. And right now, the priority is to make sure that folks who present a public safety concern to the United States and to our citizens are dealt with first. And that's what he's happened. He's also very pleased that through his action and his vision for how he wants to see to move forward on this, sees a huge drop of illegal border crossing. That is a big accomplishment for this presidency, and it's something that we're obviously very proud of.
Border crossing is a big thing, but amnesty is a big part.
I understand that.
Because he-
I've just walked through the question. Jonathan.
Sean, how confident are you that there will not be a shutdown? Can you, from that podium, guarantee that there will not be a government shutdown?
I can't guarantee, but
get?
I think that the work that Director Mulvaney and others have made in these negotiations has been very positive. They feel very confident that won't happen.
So he won't insist that his priorities get funded on the border, the wall, increased security?
That's not what I said. I said that I think
Is he willing to shut down the government?
No, it's not. Look, they're currently negotiating. We feel very confident that they understand the president's priorities and that we'll come to an agreement by the end of Friday.
And on the 100 days, if I can just follow up, the contract with the American voter that the president signed included 10 pieces of legislation. Right now, he's 0 for 10. Only one of those has actually been introduced.
Right. And I think that
Is
we're
that
going to continue to work with Congress. As he says in that document, I will work with Congress to achieve these, and we are going to continue to work with Congress to achieve those.
But why have 9 of them not even been introduced?
I think when you look at what he has done in terms of Supreme Court justice, the executive orders, the number of legislation, there's a lot that has gotten done. I don't think anyone, I remember very clearly the first few weeks, and still to some extent, the comments that got made about the pace that we were keeping and we have kept. The president has been extremely busy, and I think when you recognize the amount of issues that he's tackled, the amount of progress that he's made, it is very significant, and we will continue to present all of that throughout the week. But again, as I said to Major, I think you can look at a few of these areas and nitpick a couple of them, but I think overall, he has signed a record number of executive orders. He has rolled back regulatory reforms. No, I understand that, but right.
To take action.
But I don't think there's any question that the president has done a significant amount for the American people on the issues that he has put forward during the campaign.
Just to be clear, you're not describing the wall and healthcare as nitpicking.
Jim.
Are you?
I'm not. Neither of the. No, I'm not. Those pieces are not small. But I'm saying in terms of overall what he has accomplished has been unbelievably significant. When you talk about all of the other areas, the regulatory relief, the efforts that he's made on immigration, on trade, all of those issues. And again, what I'm trying to say is when you look at everything that he's done and the amount that he's accomplished in these first 100 days, I think you can go back and find an area, one or two, and say, okay, well, he didn't do this. But I think you have to look at it in totality of what he actually did get done.
John,
Jim.
on the wall, why is there even a discussion about shutting down the government over paying for the wall? Isn't Mexico supposed to pay for the wall?
Well, I think, Jim, the president has made very clear that initially we needed to get the funding going, and there's be several mechanisms to make sure that happens. That funding piece will happen in due time. Alexis.
That is a promise that the
I
president
understand
made
that.
during the campaign.
It is-
time
no,
and again,
no, but he also
that Mexico would pay for the wall.
Right.
And now we're having a discussion that the
No, no,
government
we-
might shut down
No, no,
over
we-
the wall. Who's going to pay?
Right. So a couple things. One, as I pointed out to Jonathan, we feel very confident the government's not going to shut down. Number two is I think the president has been very clear in the past about the fact that, and this is not a new thing, he talked about this, that in order to get the ball rolling on border security and the wall, that he was going to have to use the current appropriations process, but he would make sure that promise would be kept as far as the payment of it.
And just a real quick follow-up. If border crossings are down, and that's a talking point that the White House uses time here, is the wall even necessary?
Absolutely. The wall it does several things.
How can the border crossings be down?
Because
the
I think-
president's saying, well, we're going to have all these drugs flowing in if we don't have a wall.
Because you can't, just because you have a couple good months in a year, I think you want to make sure that you take prudent long-term steps. I mean, so the president is going to fulfill, and frankly, it's a promise that he made to the American people. I think if you're coming in from our southern border, he has taken a lot of steps so far that has deterred border crossing. But this is a permanent step that will extend beyond his presidency. 8 years from now, the next president will have that wall in place to make sure that it doesn't continue. So that
Mexico's going to pay for it.
That's right. Thank you, Alexis.
Sean, this might relate to Jim's question too, but on Wednesday, I have two questions. On Wednesday, when we see the outline that Secretary Mnuchin was just describing, will the president help aim Congress toward his decision about whether the border adjustment tax is the right idea? And also related to that, whether the pay-fors for the wall that might be of interest to lawmakers will become evident as part of the outline of what he'd like to do in terms of taxes?
Right. Well, I don't mean to evade that, but I think there's a reason he chose. We're waiting till Wednesday to have the details that he wants to share out. I'm not gonna. We got a couple days before that happens, so I'm gonna have to ask you to wait 48 hours.
Can you say whether we will have a generally better
I'm gonna-
idea?
I can
Will we
tell you-
have a generally better idea of where he?
I think you'll have a better
is?
idea of where the president stands on tax reform and what he wants to accomplish. Yes, John.
Wait, I have one follow-up.
Okay.
When you were just describing, and Secretary Mnuchin was describing, achieving an economic growth of 3% or higher, which is slightly lower than what the president talked about in the campaign, which was a very ambitious goal of 4%. I'm just trying to figure out, what is the timeline for that? Is the president thinking he would like to achieve 3% or higher in his first term because of the headwinds that were, obviously the United States is facing abroad? I mean, that's a very ambitious goal still, 3%.
Right. Well, and I think that he has taken a lot of steps, not just on the tax side, but on the regulatory side as well, that I think are clearly already paying dividends. In terms of we've talked about this before, manufacturing come back and jobs come back, and I think there's going to be a renewed commitment of many manufacturers, American companies, to bring back jobs, to grow, to hire, to expand here in the United States. And so I think that growth will precede the president's actions, both on the tax front and on the regulatory side. John.
Thanks so much, Sean. As you know, the first go-around at replacing Obamacare was not successful. Since then, are you any closer to getting 218 votes in the House to pass the replacement for the Affordable Care Act?
Yes.
And very good.
Got a number?
And elaborate a little bit more than yes.
Well, first of all, we only need 216. You're making it a little tougher on us right now. But I do think that we have seen progress with members in terms of some of the changes that have been made to make it a stronger bill. But we're getting close, and as I mentioned at the outset, when I think the president feels confident that or when the leadership of the House tells them that they feel confident that they have the votes, then I'm sure they'll call a vote, but that's up to them to decide.
And a separate one, obviously a different topic, and that's the election over the weekend in France.
Yeah.
Any comment on the results that came out of France over the weekend? Would the president be satisfied with either alternative, Macron or Le Pen?
Yeah, obviously, it's up to the people of France to decide who their next leader are, and we respect the decision that they make in May. So our job is to work with whomever the French people choose. Anita.
Two questions. One, on the budget, the spending plan, what is the president doing? I understand Mick Mulvaney and others are doing things. Is he calling members? I don't see anything on his schedule for this week. Are members coming over? What is his?
As needed, he'll be involved. I think the legislative team has been giving him updates, and as he's needed.
Members?
He has talked to members, of course. I mean, I just mentioned he's having dinner tonight with Senator McCain and Senator Graham. He's had lots of discussions with members at various times. We're not at a position now where he is actively engaging on the way he was at, say, the end of healthcare. I think as his team tells him that needs phone calls, but he is actively monitoring and being given updates by the senior team that is working with him.
Talking about his priorities, I would like you to include.
I think his priorities have been crystal clear. I mean, remember, it's starting in the first week of March. Director Mulvaney engaged with appropriators on the House side, and I'm not sure when he started with. So this has been an ongoing discussion now, almost for 8 weeks, with the senior team here and appropriators in the House in particular.
Okay, and then on the second issue, on the 100 days, if as someone mentioned, the president tweeted that it was a ridiculous, timetable or whatever. Why is the White House doing so much this week? You have indicated that all these activities this week, from hearing from different people, are because of the 100 days. Why do this 100-day push if it's a ridiculous amount?
I think we've gotten a fairly decent amount of inquiries from you and your colleagues, and so in order to answer those inquiries.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're givers. I don't think there's anyone in this room that hasn't lodged a request to say we're writing a story on the 100-day mark. We're doing this on the 100-day mark, and so we want to make sure that we answer your questions as truthfully as possible and as thoroughly and comprehensively. So we will have to fulfill all of these requests that are coming in from you and your colleagues. But I also think that we are very proud, and the president's very proud of what he's been able to accomplish in the first 100 days. And as we sprint towards these final 100 days, there's two things. One, I think because of the inquiries that we've had, we want to make sure we take an opportunity to make sure that people understand how much he's done in all the different areas. But we also want to start talking about the next 100 days and what else is left to be done, and how we're going to continue to work hard to get all of that done. But there's a lot that has been accomplished, and I think it's appropriate to comment and to share with the American people all of the things that he has done to fulfill the pledges that he made to the American people.
Just to clarify, are we going to hear, prior to the rally on Saturday, are we going to hear directly from him? There was some talk of a press conference.
Yeah, I'll have further updates on the schedule going forward on
Maybe not.
Huh?
The press conference?
I will have, we're working out some scheduling issues for the rest of the week, and I'll make sure I give you an update as we move forward. Kristen?
Thanks, Sean. I just want to circle back on healthcare, because at the top of the president's list of agenda items for the first 100 days was repealing and replacing Obamacare. So does the president want to, expect to see a vote on healthcare this week?
I'm sure, look, he'd love to do it. If the speaker and the majority leader and the whip come and tell him that they've got the votes, then we'd love to do it. I think his goal isn't to fit it into a finite timetable, as he mentioned on Friday. If it happens this week, that's great. If it happens next week, that's great too. The goal is to get it done and get it done right, and so we're not going to jam it through just for the sake of it.
So he's concerned about potentially rushing it through. I hear what
No,
you're
no,
saying. He doesn't want it to happen this week just to meet that benchmark.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me ask you about tax reform. I know you don't want to get ahead of the announcement on Wednesday.
Thank you.
But there's a sense that it is more realistic to pursue targeted tax cuts as opposed to broad tax reform.
Right.
Will we on Wednesday see a proposal for targeted tax cuts?
Well, as you stated in your question, I'll let the president and the team speak on Wednesday with respect to what they're going to outline, but I'm not going to get ahead.
Does the president think that it's realistic to do broad tax reform without having replaced Obama?
I think that the president said he's going to make there's a lot of things that are possible, but let's let the president. He made a commitment to get it out on Wednesday, so let's be patient and wait till Wednesday.
And just one more.
Of course.
Is there a plan for infrastructure reform in the works? Will we get that?
That's another thing that's on the list, but I think we seem to have our hands full right now with healthcare and tax reform. It's obviously still committed to seeing infrastructure, something he's talked about a lot in terms of roads and bridges and rebuilding things. But let's get these first two things moving. But I think you're going to see a continued commitment to infrastructure as well.
One of the things that could potentially have bipartisan
Yeah,
support. Is there an urgency to get infrastructure reform passed?
So either we're doing too much or we're not doing enough. But I think, look, he has made it very clear that is a priority of his. As you point out, it's something that I think both sides of the aisle and both chambers probably agree on. There's a public-private partnership that could really benefit our infrastructure in terms of the financing piece of this. We'll have further details on that moving forward, though. Thank you guys very much. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great Monday.
We are back. Hope you enjoyed the Sean Spicer press briefing. This is the post show for the press briefing. I am Steve Lookner. This is Right Side Broadcasting. And I want to just, before we get into the briefing, I just want to say, I want to correct something dumb, wrong I said in the pre-show. I said in the pre-show that the government shutdown, if there is one, will be, the whole possibility of a government shutdown is due to this debt ceiling issue. That is not an issue this week. The issue this week is that Congress needs to pass a continuing resolution because Congress has to approve all the government spending, and they need to pass a continuing resolution so the government can keep spending money, and that has to be done by the end of the week, or the government can't spend any money because Congress hasn't approved it. So that's the reason for the potential government shutdown, not the debt ceiling. That could become an issue in later in the year, the debt ceiling, but it's not this week. So my bad. Okay, so in this briefing, we're going to talk about some of the things Sean Spicer said, but would love to get your thoughts as well. If you want to write in, you can write to me at @Lookner on Twitter, @LOOKNER. I'll read your comment on the air, or email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Jake, are we taking calls? Well, and also, we're going to do phone calls, so if you want to call in with any thoughts on any of the things Sean Spicer talked about, any of the big issues of the day. Another issue is there's this North Korea meeting scheduled for Wednesday where all the senators are going to the White House to get briefed about North Korea. Is the White House going to tell them something specific? Is there some new information they have? We've been talking about in the office about whether this might mean that there could be some military action maybe in the future. I don't know. So what do you think about that? What do you think about any of the issues? The government shutdown, tax reform, health bills, all this stuff. So give me a shout, 202-470-0049, 202-470-0049. Some of you wrote in during the briefing, and I want to just make sure I get all the comments, get caught up there. SH7401 wrote, and we were talking about Gab in the pre-show and how Gab is an alternate for some people to Twitter. And SH7401 said, I like Gab a lot. Twitter deletes people's tweets or censors accounts like Drudge Report, even though there's nothing there to censor. So SH7401 likes Gab for that reason. Mr. D. Ebanks said, hey Steve, have a look at vid.me. It's just like YouTube and is an alternative to it, just as Gab is an alternative to Twitter. I have not tested or checked its live streaming ability, but everything else is just about the same without ads, without ads monetizing it there too. VidMe. I will look at VidMe. I haven't heard of it. I'll check it out. Thanks, Mr. D. Ebanks. Andrew Sova says, Steve, did you hear about this? A former guest on his program, Hannity, Debbie Schlussel, is accusing Hannity for sexual harassment, but Sean Hannity does vow to pursue legal action to combat those accusations. I had not heard about this. I will look it up. Thank you for writing in, Andrew. I will check that out. Some other messages here I think people sent. Let's see. Maybe I'm caught up. Oh, I also want to say thank you to Dan Canepa. Dan Canepa made a donation in the YouTube chat room to us earlier. So thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. We rely on, as I said before, we rely on your donations to stay on the air. So if you enjoy our coverage, we would be very appreciative if you consider donating. And the way to donate is you can either go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate, or if you're watching on YouTube, there's a chat room next to the show. You can just click the $ at the bottom of the chat room. So thank you, Dan, again. Vita Marie wrote in, hello, Steve and fellow live chatters. Hello, Vita Marie. Just want to say I hate the press corps. They are awful. I'm ready to send money for the wall to the White House. Thank you, Vita Marie, for writing in. So I guess the press corps' behavior in the press briefings has not improved to you over the last couple of weeks. Appreciate you writing in. I had another email here. Let me get this. That's not what I wanted to do. This is an email from, as soon as I call it up here. This is from Garrett Cantrell. Garrett writes, what are your thoughts on Fillon endorsing Macron and Le Pen's chances now? And also he says, Wednesday's White House meeting will most likely be follow-up for tomorrow's Tokyo meeting. See, this is another thing I wasn't aware of. Is there a Tokyo, North Korea meeting tomorrow? Let me look this up real quick. It says on April 25th, there will be a trilateral meeting of U.S., Japan, and South Korea, which I guess is about, is it about North Korea? About North Korea. So there is that meeting tomorrow. But, will Wednesday be a follow-up to that, or will Wednesday be something different? I mean, just the weird thing about Wednesday's meeting is, again, the White House is having all of the Senate come to the White House. Although you would think, like, if it was like they had some super huge information, they'd invite like people from the House too. It's just I'm a little confused as why is it just the Senate? What is that? What is it? I'm not totally sure what it means to invite the entire Senate, but just the Senate to a meeting in the White House. I'll be thinking about that more later today. But your other thank you. We just got a donation from a $20 donation from John PS30 in Super Chat. John, thank you so much for donating. Really appreciate it. And again, without your support, we cannot stay on the air. So that really means a lot to us. Thank you, John. And there was another part of your question, though, Garrett. What did you ask me? Oh, what are your thoughts on Fillon endorsing Macron and Le Pen's chances now? So the two finalists in the French election, it's going to be held a week from next Sunday, are Le Pen and Macron. And Macron is seen as more moderate than Le Pen. He is seen now as like the people the establishment will go for. So yeah, I just think like Fillon, he was probably the most establishment candidate in the whole election. So, and he didn't make the final two. So it's not surprising that he would endorse Macron over Le Pen. You know, in terms of Le Pen's chances, there were a couple polls that came out that said Macron, at least as of right now, is 20 points ahead of Le Pen. I think it'll be tough for Le Pen to win. I think there's just it seems that there are just a lot of people that consider her too extreme, and anybody who's like establishment is going to vote for Macron. So just from what I've been reading poll-wise, and you know, Nick Fuentes from Right Side made a good point on our programming yesterday, which on our coverage of the election yesterday, where Nick said basically, he said, you know, if she was going to really have a good chance in the final election, he thought she needed to do better in the preliminary. I think she only got 21% yesterday. So, you know, presumably the people who are really for Le Pen voted for her yesterday, and that was 21%. Now, maybe she'll pick up votes from other candidates, but it seems like it might be a tough road for her, given these initial polls, to pick up enough to win. But you never know, so we'll see what happens. But right now, if I was betting, I wouldn't bet on her to win. But the people, it's, as Sean Spicer said today, it's up to the people of France. Boog Rowe writes in, Steve, I think the landowners who live on the border should donate their land in exchange for long-term property business tax breaks. This solution would be the most beneficial to all sides. Just a thought, save the government some money. See, you're talking about, I hadn't thought about this issue at all. You're talking about building the wall, I presume, and saying that landowners had to be compensated. I don't even know what that situation is. Like, does America own, does the federal government own the land close to the border? Or is some of that private owned? I would think the border itself already has to be federal government owned. But maybe I'm wrong about this, like the exact border. That's a fascinating question. I hadn't thought about it. You're saying that the people who live, landowners who live on the border should donate their land in exchange for long-term property/business tax breaks. So I honestly have no idea how this works in terms of, to build a wall, would the federal government have to take land from private landowners, or do they have enough land already to build it? So I can't really give an intelligent answer to your question. And I don't know how it works in terms of compensation if they do, you know, with eminent domain and all this stuff. So I don't know. I'll have to look this up. That's a good question, Boog, and a good area to ask about. I just don't know. So thanks for writing in, Boog. When you guys writing in, I you know, in addition to helping the show a lot and making it fun, I also think you writing in, you do a good job of letting me know how much. I always find out about all these things I actually don't know anything about, and then I'm like, I got to go research that. Vita Marie says, I think it would be a good idea to have a live feed on the wall in the press room for reporters to see our comments in real time. So you want there to be a TV on the wall, perhaps, where the right side broadcaster comments viewer comments could come up in real time so the reporters could see it. I don't think that'll happen anytime soon, but it's certainly it's a suggestion. It would be entertaining to see, I think. Yeah, at least for a day, to have them see what the comments are. But I'm guessing it won't happen. Thanks, Vita Marie, though. Let's see. So this is the post show for the press briefing. We are taking your comments and your questions. We're taking your calls. If anybody wants to call in, 202-470-0049. I also had some things I wanted to, and if you want to write in your comments, at Lookner on Twitter, at LOOKNER. That's where you can find me, or direct message me at steve.lookner@rspn.tv. I wanted to mention some stuff Sean Spicer said in his briefing. Let me just call up my notes here. So, let's see. Sean Spicer, some of the things he said were, well, at the start of the briefing, I should point out that he did have Nikki Haley from the UN come in and talk about this meeting that President Trump is hosting today. A bunch of representatives from the UN Security Council at the White House. And one of our viewers wrote me about this in the pre-show, and I hadn't heard about this, so then I heard about it during the briefing. So a bunch of people from the diplomats from the Security Council are coming and visiting the White House today. President Trump is going to meet with them at some point. I think they're meeting with people from Congress too. So Nikki Haley spoke about that, and then Steve Mnuchin came in to talk about the government shutdown stuff and some other stuff, and he said that the president, Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, said the president is working hard to keep the government open. He said also that they're having discussions on the Paris Agreement. So no word yet whether the president is going to pull us out of the Paris Agreement to reduce climate change and global warming, which was passed, which President Obama entered into in 2015. Stephen Mnuchin. I can't recall if there was a specific, because when I was running back into the office when Stephen Mnuchin came on, so I didn't see if he had what specific reason he came in to talk about. I'm imagining it might have been about the government shutdown, but he also he said something about the tax cut plan. He said President Trump's tax cut plan will pay for itself with economic growth. That's what Steve Mnuchin said. And let's see. And another thing that was announced at the beginning of the press briefing is that the U.S. Treasury has announced new sanctions on Syria. So 271 employees of Syria's Scientific Studies and Research Center were sanctioned in response to the chemical weapons attack from a few weeks ago. And I believe these sanctions have to do with freezing their personal assets or making their assets impossible to get to for them. I need to look at the details of those sanctions, but those sanctions were put in place. There are some more things Sean Spicer talked about, but I want to just catch up on Twitter. And also, Vida Marie says, she had made the suggestion about, Vida Marie wrote in, she had made the suggestion about having the comments from Right Side Broadcaster viewers playing on the wall during the press briefing so the press could see it. And Vida Marie says, hell yes, so they can see our comments of their dumb questions. Okay, thank you, Vida Marie, for writing in. And, okay, let me go back. Oh, I should point out, too, I'd seen this, that Ann Coulter had announced that she was filing a lawsuit this morning against UC Berkeley with the goal of being able to be allowed to speak on her original speech date that was then canceled by the university. The original speech date was August 27th, I think, so that lawsuit has been filed. Okay, let me go back to I want to get back to some other things Sean Spicer mentioned during the briefing. Hold on one sec, please. Sean Spicer, he was asked, as we predicted, he was asked about the French presidential election. Well, I don't think that was such a bold prediction, but he said, he did say, as we said, he wasn't committal as about any candidate President Trump supports, as we predicted, and he said, it's up to the people of France. He repeated, Sean Spicer, the administration's position that Mexico is going to pay for the wall. He said, I can't guarantee there won't be a shutdown, but he said that the people in the White House are very confident it won't happen. He said, you're going to eventually see healthcare get done and get done right. He said that. He was asked a number of questions about, what has President Trump accomplished in his first 100 days and how do you feel about that? And he said, he thinks it's been a hugely successful first 100 days, and that the president, they're proud in the White House of what they've been able to do. He said that President Trump got a lot done with the executive orders. President Sean Spicer also said he was asked about the level of engagement that China has had with North Korea, and he said there were very positive signs about this. So they seem happy with what China is doing, what China's involvement with North Korea. Although we're not aware exactly of we haven't been informed of what exactly China is doing to pressure North Korea, but we've been told the White House is suggesting that they're putting some pressure on North Korea. And hold on, I just want to make sure that there's not some emergency here. we have, what else did he talk about here? Oh, also, so regarding this bill, there could be a government shutdown by the end of the week if there's not a continuing resolution passed for government spending by Congress. And Sean Spicer said that President Trump had two priorities for this continuing resolution. He wanted to see more money for defense in there and money for the border wall. So we'll see if that actually happens. The Democrats have been resisting putting money for the border wall in the continuing resolution. We'll see what happens. Maybe there'll be a government shutdown this weekend, at least a short one, don't know. That's going to happen soon. That's coming up on Friday. And it'll also be interesting. So remember, President Trump has a rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday. I'm forgetting, I think, Jake, it's Harrisburg, but correct me if I'm wrong. Am I wrong? Harrisburg. Yeah, so we are planning on going and covering that for you, doing our full day of coverage as we normally do, talking to people in line early in the morning and showing all the speakers and showing President Trump's entire speech. But, it'll be really interesting. Can you imagine if there's a government shutdown on Saturday and President Trump has his rally and what he talks about at the rally? I mean, he'd probably talk about the government shutdown, but that would be quite a speech. I do remember one of the previous rallies we covered about a month ago, President Trump, it was the night of, he came on, this was the rally in Nashville, and I believe he came on right after, I think this was rally in Nashville, and he came on right after, there had been an announcement that his second travel ban executive order had been put on hold by a federal judge. And so he spoke a half an hour after that happened, and he had some choice words for the federal judge in the federal court system that did this to his that stopped his executive order from being put into effect. And we could sort of see a similar thing in the sense of, if there's a government shutdown, everybody's going to be watching that rally speech to see what he says, and will he be angry about it? That'd probably be his first, maybe it might be his first big comment on the situation after the shutdown actually starts happening. And also, Saturday is going to be his first 100 days. That's the end of his first 100 days on Saturday. And it's just to point out, he's having this rally on Saturday, in case you hadn't heard, on the same night as the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which he said he wasn't going to go to earlier. So we're looking forward to bringing that rally to you, full coverage of it on Saturday from Pennsylvania. If you'd like to help us cover the rally, it's expensive to go. As I said before, we are driving instead of flying, which might sound crazy, but it's just, it's expensive to fly, and we don't have a lot of money here, so that's what we're doing. If you'd like to chip in, we got some contributions last night for food and gas and stuff. If you'd like to help us on that, or just to help us stay on the air, please consider donating. We rely on your donations to stay on the air and to cover these events like the rallies. You can either go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate, or if you're watching on YouTube, there's a chat room right next to this broadcast. You can click on the $ at the bottom of the chat room and donate that way. Okay, let me check here on Twitter. And again, if you'd like to, we're taking your messages, your calls, your emails. To call 202-470-0049, to hit me up on Twitter. Does that sound weird? Hit me up on Twitter? That's like say hi to me. No, I mean write to me on Twitter. Direct message me at Lookner, at Lookner, and you can also email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. What do you think? Will there be a government shutdown? Do you think there will be? I'd like to know. What do you think this whole meeting is on Wednesday about with North Korea? Why is President Trump having the entire Senate come to the White House on Wednesday to talk about North Korea? What do you think about that? Would like to hear from you. JC, one of our moderators. JC, thank you, moderators, for all you do. JC says, hey, Steve, great job. Thank you. And thank you for RSBN. I cannot wait for the POTUS rally. JC, gonna zap some trolls. Great. Here, trolly. So that is JC. He does a great job with all the other moderators in the YouTube chat room, zapping all the trolls. It's a troll-free environment. It's a cool place to go chat about President Trump and politics if you haven't checked it out. Also, thanks to the moderators on rsbn.tv moderating the chat there. Let's see, I'm checking my email here. And there was something else I wanted to mention. Let me just take a drink of water for a second. What did I want to mention? And I will say, so I was wondering, I've heard different people talk about this, but this whole 100 days thing, like, in previous administrations, so people would talk about the first 100 days, but was there like all this like media talk about like, he's under pressure, got to do something first 100 days? I mean, maybe I'm remembering wrong. Maybe with President Obama it was like that too. I just feel like it's like an excuse. It's this weird thing, because to me it's like healthcare legislation or tax legislation, that's so complex. So like, to expect any president to like pass complex legislation in their first 100 days seems like, I mean, how much can you really expect of them? Like, if you want good legislation, it might take longer than that. So, I don't think any president, including President Trump, should be faulted for like not passing like major legislation in the first 100 days. So, it seems maybe this is being, so like, for example, Jake Tapper, who I follow on Twitter, who I actually think, reports on, does some good Twitter, sends out some good updates on Twitter. But he tweeted out today, yesterday, what's his show called? I can't even remember what it's called. The something or other with Jake Tapper. But his show on CNN, he's like, we're going to be on like twice a day this week for like the first 100 days. We're going to be on in prime time in addition to at 5 p.m. because just to cover the first 100 days. And it's like, what are you covering? You're covering like this fake deadline that doesn't matter. It's just like, so it's something the press likes to pray. The press is a business. News networks are a business, and they like that. Just like with the Russia thing, when Rachel Maddow would do a big special on the Russia connection when there was no new news about it, important news that I thought, and no new evidence about it. So they like any excuse they have to like make a big event out of something, to try to get more viewers. That's what the 100 days stuff is starting to feel like to me, with the amount of focus on it. I mean, and it's something that, I don't think President Trump doesn't care about it, but I think part of the reason he cares about it is because everybody makes such a big deal about it. So there's the 100 days thing. Then there was another thing I had to mention. I got to say this. I've been meaning to say this for a while. Something has been happening that really bothers me, that Congress people say, and other people say when it comes to health care bill. But I hear this in Congress a lot. I hear it on both sides of Congress. Like, somebody will propose a health care bill, the president will propose it, or somebody else will propose it, and they'll say something like, well, this bill clearly doesn't work because it does X, or this bill doesn't work for me because it does Y. And they'll pick one thing out and they'll say, this bill doesn't work for me because it does this. But the problem is, I think like most of these people aren't going to vote for any bill. So, for example, like, and this I've noticed Republicans will say this, like this is one example, like somebody will say something like, definitely Democrats have said this kind of thing, but I feel like I've heard like more moderate Republicans say something like, well, I can't vote for this health care bill proposal because it doesn't have people it allows companies to raise prices for pre-existing conditions, and it allows them to deny insurance for people with pre-existing conditions. So I can't vote for that bill. Now, when you say something like this, the implication is that there is some replacement for Obamacare that you would be willing to vote for. But I feel like a lot of these people aren't willing to vote for any replacement for Obamacare. I think for a lot of people in Congress, they will never vote for a replacement for Obamacare that is less of an entitlement for Obamacare, because they don't want to vote against an entitlement. So, but rather than say, I'm just never going to vote for a replacement for Obamacare that cuts the entitlement parts of Obamacare, which is their honest view, they'll say, well, I can't vote for this proposed replacement because this proposed replacement does this one thing. And it's really insincere to me, it's disingenuous, because it lets them imply that they'd vote for some other replacement, whereas I really do feel that a lot of them who say this kind of thing actually would never vote for any replacement because they're not going to vote against an entitlement. So I see that a lot, and it really was bothering me. And I'm sure I'll see it again. So just wait till the next bill is proposed. Okay, So we're going to answer a couple messages here, and then we have a few minutes left here. I want to get to your messages, and I also want to talk to you about tonight on Right Side Broadcasting. Here you can watch. We have America First with Nick Fuentes at 8 p.m. Check that out, and Wayne Dupree Show at 9 p.m. Andrew Sova writes, Steve, didn't the government shut down in 2013 under Barack Obama? You know, I was reading about what happened in 2013 earlier, and I can't even remember if it shut down or was close to shutting down. So I'm going to really quickly look this up and see if I can find something quick for you. Yes, it shut down from October 1st through October 16th, 2013, Andrew. So you were right. John Stanton writes in, Steve, let's not forget that had Trump implemented all of the 100-day pledges, dirty, filthy media would still create noise about the president. The only reason to watch the press briefings is to watch Spicer be the only adult in the room. That is from John Stanton. John, thank you for your comment. And let me just check my email here and see if we're caught up. Let's see. Okay, we're all caught up. So I think we're going to end the broadcast now. And let me just say, so it's going to be a busy week. There's going to be, this shutdown might happen on Friday. We'll keep an eye on that. There's the meeting about North Korea with the senators in the White House on Wednesday. I think there's some other stuff going on. I think there might be President Trump having a press conference. I heard he was going to have some sort of press conference on Thursday. I read this over the weekend. And so we will keep you up to date. If there's breaking news on whatever, we will, of course, bring that to you. And we will bring you all of the briefings, Sean Spicer briefings this week, and President Trump press conferences, anything like that. Happy to bring it to you. Hope you check out our programming this evening that I just mentioned. And feel free, subscribe to us. I would encourage you to subscribe to us on YouTube and click the notifications bell so you get notifications about all our videos. At Twitter, you can follow us at RSB Network. I am at Lookner, at LOOKNER. Thank you to Jake Seals for producing. And Jake, you can follow at Jacob RSBN Music. Thank you to the moderators for moderating today. Thank you to the people who donated. Really appreciate it. If you want to donate, go to rsbn.tv/donate. Help us stay on the air. And really looking forward to bringing you the President Trump rally on Saturday. Very excited for that. So for now, hope you have a great day. We will see you later on, either today or tomorrow or sometime soon. So enjoy your day.